around the beginning of September, and it's based on, well, various numerous works from 10 years ago, and lots of discussion with Davide-Gaiotto and Philip Argyres and also here. So today I'm going to talk about S-dualities of four-dimensional gauge theory, but with non-simply based gauge groups. So it's a rather subtle subject, and so let me begin with a short introduction. So let's consider in 4 dimensions as very highly supersymmetric gauge theories, like n equals 4 super-Young males with gauge group G, or in general, n equals 2 gauge theory with 0, 1 loop beta function. So you choose the matter content so that the beta function vanishes at 1 loop. Then it is believed that the partition function, the coupling constant, doesn't run to all order, even non-perturbatively. So if you believe that, then that means that this complexified coupling tau, which is a nice combination of the coupling constant and the theta term, doesn't run. So you can tune that. Tune the value at UV, and that value stays to low energy. So when this tau corresponds to weak coupling, which means that if the imaginary part is very big, so G is very small, it's in a perturbative regime, and you can, you know what they are. They are just theory of gauge fields and fermions and scalars. But what happens when this coupling becomes very strong? So in the case of n equals 4, it is known that there is a dual description where you have a dual, some other description, which becomes weakly coupled. And similar things happen for n equals 2 case 2. So for n equals 4, you have this Montonen-Olive duality. So what happens is that the n equals 4 super-Young males with gauge group G at coupling constant tau is equivalent to n equals 4 gauge theory with possibly different gauge group, which I denote LG, at a different coupling, which is basically given by the inverse of the original coupling with a certain factor. So this certain factor can take a value 1 or 2 or 3, and this is the simplest case where the gauge group is either SUN or SO even or XE type gauge group, and this is 2 if it is SO odd or USB or F4, and this is 3 for G2. This LG is given by G, and at the level of the Lie algebra, the only case where LG is different from G is for this pair of BN gauge group and CN gauge group.
Wait, now you confused me.
Yep.
The Langland's dual of SUN is PSUN.
Yes.
He was careful to say at the level of the...
I only said, yeah. Today I only distinguished the algebra, not the...
Big G is not a group, but a Lie algebra?
Yes. Sorry about that.
Okay. All right.
There's a G in algebra.
Yeah. Well, because I didn't like to put every SU and others lowercase.
Which you should do.
Yes. Sorry about that. So let me give you an example. Let me give more explanation of this LG. This is called either Goddard-Newton-Olive dual or Langland's dual of G. So this concept is introduced into mathematics by Langland and in physics by Goddard-Newton-Olive almost at the same time. So as a physicist, I think we should call this GNO dual, but I put L. N equals 4 super-Young males has 6 adjoint scalars. So you can give a VEV to any of them. And let's give a VEV to one of the adjoint scalar. In the Cartan of G, now I use lowercase. And let's break the gauge group to completely abelian group, which is U1 to some power R. theory is abelian, and you gave a mass to lots of W bosons, which are in the off-diagonal components of the gauge field, and each of the root of the Lie algebra corresponds to a W boson with mass given by the inner product of this root with a VEV. So I'm thinking of this VEV as an R-dimensional vector in the Cartan subalgebra of the Lie algebra. So this is the formula for the mass of the W boson, and this theory, once you break it to U1 to the R, has also lots of monopoles. The way you can create a monopole is just to take the standard 't-Hooft Polyakov monopole of the SU2 gauge group broken down to U1 and use that, and you embed that standard solution to the bigger group by choosing an SU2 subgroup. An easy way to do that is to take again a root which corresponds to a SU2 subgroup inside G, and you construct a solution. If you carefully calculate the mass of that monopole, this is basically proportional to tau, 1 over G squared, and also mostly proportional to the same combination, root inner product with the VEV, but with this funny factor 2 divided by the length square of alpha. So you have a slightly different set of masses for the monopoles.
So you're taking the co-root and the dual of the Cartan algebra?
Yes.
The co-root, of course, belongs in the Cartan.
Right.
So you've made a choice of killing
Yes.
normalization of the...
Yes. I'm taking the normalization where the long root length squared is 2.
Okay.
So the way this duality works when you break the theory to U1 to the R's is this. So the W boson's mass is controlled by the roots. On the other hand, the mass of the monopoles are controlled by this alpha star, which is given by 2 times alpha divided by alpha absolute value squared. So you exchange this set of W bosons and the monopoles. So what happens is that, for example, if you consider SU7 gauge group, which breaks down to U1 cubed, you have, once you break it down to U1 cubed, W bosons have charges under that U1 cubed, right? So let's introduce the basis of the electric charges, which is E1, E2, and E3. Then the off-diagonal components of SO7 gives you lots of W bosons given by this set of charges, which are given by plus minus EI, plus minus EJ for I different from J, or just plus minus EI.
Right, so those are the roots of SO7.
Yeah, this is the root of SO7. And if you take the co-roots, which are given by this, these vectors have length squared 2, so 2 divided by 2 is 1, so you have exactly the same set for the magnetic charges, which is plus minus MI, plus minus MJ, but if you take this short root, which has length squared 1, because you divide 2 alpha by 1, you get twice the length of the original one. So what you see is that the set of W bosons, the set of mass or charges of the W bosons and that of the monopoles are slightly different in this case. But the important thing is that the set of the co-root also forms the root of a different group, which in this case is USP6. So, and the ratio basically of this mass of W bosons to the monopoles give the gauge coupling. So if you believe that there's a duality which exchanges this and that also exchanges tau to basically minus 1 over tau. And this extra factor Ng appears as the ratio of the long roots, the length of the long roots and short roots. So that's the case of n equals 4. What happens if you consider n equals 2? So n equals 4, super Yang-Mills is just a special case of n equals 2, gauge theory, where the matter fields transform also in the adjoint representation. But instead of using just one adjoint representation, you can use 2n of fundamental representation, hypermultiplets, to get a vanishing beta function. You just open a table of the beta function contributions, and you see that if you have n equals 2 SUN gauge group, you can add 2n quark pairs, and it's conformal. So you can tune this tau at UV, and I took a slightly different normalization of tau by a factor of 2, because it's known that here it is not that W bosons and monopoles exchanged. Here, quarks and monopoles exchanged. So,
what's the periodicity of theta?
yeah, that's the important part. So theta is still invariant under the addition of 2 pi. This is the standard gauge theory theta. But only for the case of SU2, where the doublet representation and the anti-doublet representation is the same, you can combine the shift of tau by pi, theta by pi.
This is meaningless. What is theta multiplying in, I mean, what normalization
This
of trace
theta,
HF?
this theta is the standard gauge theory theta, which multiplies the instanton number.
No, come on.
What he's really asking is, when you write down the action,
Yeah. So
what's the normalization of
one instanton contributes as exponential by theta.
What does one instanton mean? That is the minimal
Instanton of SUN.
S4.
On S4, yes.
Okay.
That's the normalization I'm taking. Yeah.
Another way to say it is that the action,
Right.
rather than being 1 over the imaginary part of, 4 pi
Right.
tau is the imaginary
Right.
part of 8, or 4 divided
Right.
by power to 4 pi is 8
Right.
power 8.
Yeah. I always normalize gauge theory theta so that the theory is invariant on R4 if you shift theta by 2 pi.
Okay.
If you just have gauge field. But for SU2, something special happens because the doublet representation and the anti-doublet representations are in fact the same representation. So you can combine the shift of theta by pi with the charge conjugation of the hypermultiplet to produce another minus signs so that they cancel. So in fact, for SU2, this theory is invariant under this transformation tau goes to tau plus 1. So this is a special property of SU2. Also, you can study n equals 2 gauge theory using Seiberg-Gaiotto theory.
So let's see. So you're saying that if I work out the partition function, I'll only see sine 2 theta?
Yes.
Or sine 2n theta? When
Right.
I do an instant
Right.
constant?
For SU2.
When I have SU2 with all these 4 doublets?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so these theories can be analyzed using the technique of the Seiberg and Witten. And the Seiberg-Witten curve is indeed invariant under these transformations of the shift of tau, and also it's invariant under this inversion of tau. So what does that mean about the strongly coupled limit of this theory? So tau lives on the upper half plane, and so let's first consider SU2. So if you combine these two actions, whatever point on the upper half plane can be brought into this green region. This means that, when you try to make it very strongly coupled, you can find a transformation which brings you back to this green region. So, around here it's moderately strongly coupled, but you cannot go infinitely strongly coupled. So these things are okay, and this theory is self-dual.
So SU2 always means the superconformal one.
Yeah,
With four
SU2 with 4 flavors. SU2 with 4 flavors. So this was found by, their original paper in 1994. But for the other number of colors, there is a problem because you only have this shift of tau by 2. So if tau, the real part of tau is 1, which means that theta equals pi, then you cannot find any duality transformation which brings you back to at least moderately coupled, at most moderately coupled coupling. So there is this very strongly coupled region, and people wondered what is going on there. Is it just really strongly coupled, or do we have some weakly coupled dual description? In 2007, it's already 3 years ago, around this time of the year, Argyres and Seiberg came up with this brilliant idea. So they found or proposed that at this point, or close to this point, there is an emergent weakly coupled SU2 gauge theory whose coupling is 1 over 1 minus tau. So you just shift tau by 1 and take the inverse to get the weakly coupled tau prime. And they found that this SU2 is also coupled to one doublet hypermultiplet, and also to a strongly coupled superconformal field theory which has E6 flavor symmetry. So this is a very unconventional proposal around that time, because around that time people rarely thought about coupling a standard gauge field to some very strongly coupled mysterious theory dynamically. So this is kind of a weakly coupled description, but it is not really weakly coupled because you are left with this very mysterious theory. But at least you have a dual different description. So this is for SU3, and later
so this Namaschansky-Minahan theory has no tunable parameters?
it doesn't have any tunable parameters. Yeah. So Gaiotto in 2009 generalized this and to a far larger class of Kuiper gauge theories, and this particular case of SUN with 2n flavors was studied quite recently by Chakaltana and Disler, whose nice paper appeared again in September. So things are very similar. You again find a weakly coupled SU2 gauge group with one doublet hypermultiplet, but this still couples to a strange CFT with big flavor symmetry.
You can show it's strange by showing their anomalous dimensions.
Yeah, I will go into explain that. So that's basically a teaser. So all these dualities, both n equals 4 and n equals 2, can be understood by starting from 6-dimensional supersymmetric theory on a Riemann surface, possibly with functions. So this method was developed by Argyres-Seiberg-Gaiotto. And one problem you have is that this 6-dimensional theory comes only in the variety A, D, or E. So you can easily get SU gauge group or SO even or E-type gauge group in 4 dimensions, which is good. But if you want to get SO odd or USB gauge groups, you are out of luck if you just use the standard technique. What you need to do is to introduce a twist
How do
line.
you know that there aren't 60 theories with non-simply rest gauge?
I should have said that nobody knows whether there exists a 6D theory with non-simply based quote-unquote gauge group. So for the case of n equals 4, it's basically done by Varfa. And my objective is to explore this type of system and describe its dualities involving non-simply based gauge groups. But I think it's more important for me to review the simply based case, how it works, before going into a very technical aspects of subtleties concerning non-simply based case group. So that's what I'm going to do. So this is the introduction, and so do you have any questions so far? Can I proceed? So I'm going to describe the n equals 4 system first, and then I'm going to describe the n equals 2 system, and that's it. So let me give you the n equals 4 case. So the theory I'm going to use is a 6-dimensional theory with 2, 0 supersymmetry. This is a theory decoupled from gravity, which you can construct starting from string or M theory. This has 16 supercharges, which is as many as for the n equals 4. This is a chiral theory. So in 6D, you can have left-handed supersymmetry and the right-handed supersymmetry, which are really distinct. And I'm using 2, 0. And this theory is believed to be conformal. This theory comes with, as I just said, A, D, or E type. But this is not the gauge theory. It's something like a non-abelian two-form theory, whatever that phrase means. But at least it is known that you can give a verb to some scalar degrees of freedom in this theory. So let's give a verb.
Sorry.
Yep.
What defines these theories with all these different G's?
So the most uniform construction is to put type 2B superstring on ALE manifold of type G. In the case of A and D, you can start from M5 branes and put n of them on top of each other or on top of M theory orientifold. But the only uniform construction is to use type 2B. So if you give a scalar verb, this quote-unquote non-abelian two-form gauge theory or whatever breaks down to a theory which we can describe. So this is good. So this becomes a theory of R abelian two forms, omega I goes from 1 to R, whose field strength is self-dual. And there are strings on this 6-dimensional theory which couples to these degrees of freedom. There are many types of strings there. The tension of various types of strings is given by the formula, which is very similar to what I just showed in the case of n equals 4 super-Yang-Mills. So the type of strings is labeled by a root of this A or D or E, and the tension is given by the inner product of this root and the scalar. It's a bit abstract, so let me give you a explicit description, which is easy to visualize in the case of A-type theory. So you take capital N, almost coincident M5 branes, takes the IR limit, and let's remove the center of mass mode. In this case, verbs just corresponds to the position of the M5 branes. So they are given by a vector of n variables, A1 to AN, so that the sum is 0. And in M theory, M2 branes can have ends on M5 brane. So if the M2 branes extend between ith and jth M5 brane, the length of the interval is given by AI minus AJ, which means that there are many types of branes, many types of strings on the 6-dimensional theory, whose mass is given by this, so that the root is given by AI minus AJ. This is exactly the root of SUN.
So you're suppressing the whole SO5R symmetry?
Yes. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
So let's compactify this theory on S1 of radius R6. Almost by the definition of the M theory, this becomes D4 branes. So this is, if you compactify that on R6, this is a 5-dimensional gauge theory with SUN gauge group. So very schematically, you should have a Lagrangian like this. And in 5D, this is still dimension 4, so this should have dimension 1. And if you believe me that this 6D theory is conformal, the only scale in the compactification is the radius of the circle. This means that this 1 over G is basically should be given by 1 over R6. And if you have a string wrapping around this S1, you have a particle. If you have a string which is not wrapped around this S1, you have a string in the 5D. So you can identify them as doubly bosons and monopoles, monopole strings. Let's further compactify this system on another S1. So for simplicity, for most of the time I'm considering a really rectangular with right angle here, torus. So with this length R6, this length R5, and I will call this cycle E, this direction M. So let's start from 6D theory of type G, give a vector, and put it on the torus. So once you compactify this around R6, you get 5D gauge theory, and further compactification gives you a factor of R5 here. So this means that the 4D coupling is basically given by the ratio of the length of two sides of the rectangle. So you can wind the 6D string around here or around there, right? So the strings wrapped around here becomes a particle of mass given by the tension times this length. On the other hand, if you wrap around this cycle, you get a particle with tension times the length. It's very easy. So you easily see that the ratio of the masses are given by the ratio of the sides, length of the sides. And in this construction, the invariance under tau goes to minus 1 over tau is kind of manifest. So it exchanges monopoles, and
how do you see it's a monopole from this point of view?
you need to check the charges. If you use, for example, type 2B description, the self-duality of the fiber-form flux means that if this particle is coupled to the wall.
That I know, but if I'm going straight down the 4, that's a way to see. But this, I mean, I know it's true. And I also know how to see it from 5 dimensions, so I'm just asking, if I just think about strings dropping one or the other.
Then you need to use the self-duality of the...
I guess you have to use the self-duality.
Yeah, self-duality of the 3-form field on the 6D.
Yeah.
But it's abelian, right? So as long as you give
Yeah,
a
you
there.
can go to the Coulomb branch.
Yeah.
Well, but that's kind of cheating, isn't it?
I'm cheating.
No, that's not really cheating. I mean, that's generally how you check that you have monopoles in the first place. You have a Coulomb branch, you have a massive particle that can actually identify, count its charges.
Yeah,
and
I cannot talk about the origin.
You're absolutely right. You have to go to the Coulomb branch to have a monopole.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
So, how can you get the non-simply laced thing? It's kind of fun, so let me describe it. So we can start from D-type theory, which is SO even type theory, 6D. If you compactify that on S1, you get 5D SO2N gauge theory. In order to break SO even to SO odd, what you do is to compactify SO even theory, even gauge theory on S1, with a strange boundary condition, which does the parity transformation, not of the spacetime, but parity transformation of the gauge group, when you glue the two ends of the interval to form a circle. So the part which commutes with this parity transformation is, of course, SO2n minus 1. So that's how you get SO odd. In terms of Deakin diagram, well, if you remember the Deakin diagram of SO2n theory, there is this symmetry which exchanges this node and that node. And I also wrote the mass of the particles if you get them. So in order to consistently exchange the mass, strings of type this and that, you need to set them to equal. So you first set A5 to 0.
Oh, so you can only do this in some parts of the modular space.
Yes. And once you do that, because I identify them, that becomes the root whose type, tension is given by A4. So you get SO odd thinking diagram and root system.
This is a little more confusing now. So
Okay.
So what we obtain in four-dimensional theory is a massless SON minus 1.
Right.
And then towers of states that are somehow
Indeed.
Yes. So how do the how do the massive ones at the first level transform on the SO2n minus 1? How do they end up being the... I mean, if it's n equals 4, they're going to have to be in the adjoint? Or not?
No. It's a strange theory. If you keep the countercline towers,
Yeah.
you really get a more interesting system.
So, but it has the full n equals 4 supersymmetry?
Yes.
But the multiplets are of the sort that I've never heard of?
Yes. I can tell you the details. It's quite interesting.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. You should think of the gauge group as the loop group if you keep the countercline towers.
That, unfortunately for me, doesn't do much in this kind of situation, but you can
Anyway, yeah. So what's the 6B interpretation? So you do this two-step process. You first compactify around R6, and then compactify around R5, but you do something when you go around this direction. So what you do is to replace the type of the strings corresponding to this and that when you cross this. Across this red line, the string of type alpha 4 becomes type of alpha 5.
So wait, so your non-trivial holonomy is on the colored line, is that right?
Well, if you cross the
No, that's
line,
what I'm confused.
yeah,
Is it going around the red line or crossing the red line?
crossing the line.
I see. So the non-trivial holonomy,
Yeah, non-trivial holonomy
is on the M
yes,
loop.
yes, on the M loop. Yeah, there are two conventions denoting holonomies, but I'm using undergraduate complex analysis type of notation of drawing the cuts across which you have the...
Good. So that's a cut.
Yeah, that's a cut.
That's a cut.
And in order to have constant wave, because they are interchanged, as I already told you, A5 needs to be 0. So let's see what are the particles. You can wrap strings of type alpha 1 around here without any problem. Similarly for alpha 2 and 3. If you wrap strings of type alpha 4 around this direction, something interesting happens. Because if you slide that string along this direction and cross this red line, the type of strings changes, right? So you cannot really distinguish strings of type alpha 4 wrapped on E and the strings of type alpha 5 wrapped on E.
4 on E.
Yeah. So you have strings wrapped on this cycle,
Yes.
which originally has type alpha 4.
Okay.
So you slowly move that.
Yes.
Suddenly you cross this line, and suddenly the type of alpha 4 changes to alpha 5.
Okay. So, right. Alpha 4 is exchanged with alpha
Yeah.
5.
So you should not distinguish these two types of particles. So that's what happens for the...
Why do you say it's alpha 5 wrapped on M?
Oh, sorry.
That's a
This is
misprint.
E. Sorry.
That's E.
Yeah, this is typo. Thank you. On the other hand, what happens if you wrap something around this cycle? You can wrap strings of type alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha 3 without any problem. But if you try to wrap particle of type alpha 4 by extending the strings around here, the type of the strings changes. So you cannot close the string. So you need to go around it twice. Or equivalently, you need to have the combination of strings of type alpha 4 and alpha 5 and go around once. So the masses can be calculated from this description quite easily. So the electric particles are of mass A1 minus A2, A3 minus A4, and A4. But because the particle wrapped around here effectively wraps it twice, you have a factor of 2 here. So you naturally see the difference in the spectrum of the particles. So you get roots of SO9 for the electric particles and things with SO8, sorry, USB8 on the magnetic side. So this shows the difference. What happens if you take the dual? So let me recap the construction. If you compactify 6D theory on S1, you get SO2N theory. A further compactification along S1 with this parity twist, you get SO odd. If you do it in the other way, you compactify this theory with this twist, 6D theory on this twist, and somehow you get 5D USB theory. And you compactify without doing anything along this cycle, and you get 4D USB theory. This way you see the Montonen-Olive duality in this most subtle case. You can have more fun. So far I only talked about the really rectangular case, but if you take a slanted torus and compactify 6D theory on it, this slantedness gives you the theta angle of the 4D theory. So please accept the fact for now. And let's see the periodicity of tau as the torus. So in this case, if you shift tau to tau plus 1, this torus is basically equivalent to the original torus. So in this case, you can identify the tau of the torus as the tau of the gauge theory. However, for USB, it's not the case, because you have this twist line around this cycle. So if you shift tau to tau plus 1, this is equivalent as geometry, but you have a cut along the diagonal. This is not equivalent, right? If you go around here, you get twist. If you go around this direction, you don't get the twist. But in this description, in either way, you get the twist. So this is definitely a different configuration. But if you slide again by 1, so effectively if you shift by 2, you get this cycle, this twist line, and this is in fact equivalent to having just this, because whenever, if you go around this direction, you cross this red line once. So you have this twist.
Well, it's just a Z2.
Yeah, because this is Z2. If you cross this side, always you cross this red line twice. This means that you don't have the red line. So this means that this tau of torus is twice. Is it the other way around? No.
I don't see how you can close it back.
Yeah, so
I understand that if you do it twice, you don't.
yeah. So if you normalize the tau
Yeah.
of the gauge theory to be invariant and the tau goes to tau plus 1, this should be the case.
Oh, okay.
Right? So when you exchange the role of this side and the other side, tau and tau prime of the torus is related by the usual thing. Tau prime goes to -1 over tau. But because of this relation and the other relation, you get this extra factor of 2. So this is the subtle factor I referred to. So it's a very nice geometric way of understanding this subtle factor. Okay, so this is basically all for the N=4, and I'm going to discuss the most interesting case of G2, which is given by, so in the case of D4, you have one more symmetry of the diagram of rotating this. This rotates vector representation, spinor representation, and conjugate spinor representations of SO8. And twisting by this automorphism gives G2 gauge group in 4D.
Again, you're twisting just around one cycle of the torus.
Yeah. So I will come back to this if I have time. So that's N=4. So you can have a lot of fun just by considering.
So that gives you G2 in 4 dimensions.
Yes. Well, so you can do that exercise of wrapping D-breaks strings around this cycle and the other cycle, and you see the spectrum of G2. Let's go to N=2, so you can have more fun. So again, let's recall that this 6D theory had 16 supercharges. So if you put that on a flat space, it doesn't break any supersymmetry. Well, if you take the supersymmetric boundary condition. If you put that on a curved space, well, of course, in general, it breaks all of the supersymmetry, but you can preserve half of the supersymmetry by carefully putting it, put the theorem in, by twisting, topological twisting. And you can have n equals 2 in 4D. In that case, the web of the 6D theory can vary holomorphically on the Riemann surface, and effectively, A transforms as a 1 form on the Riemann surface C. You can also put the defect operator, which is codimension 2, into the Riemann surface, and then these webs can diverge in a controlled manner. So we can say that A can vary meromorphically on C. So again, let's discuss the A-type case to get some idea. So as I said, A, the web, can vary meromorphically. The tension of the strings, as I said, is given by alpha dot A. When going around the loop in the Riemann surface, because A can vary holomorphically, the set of the tensions also vary holomorphically. And when you go around the loop, A does not have to come back to itself. The only thing required is that the set of the tensions to come back to itself. So in the n equals 2 case, it is not...
Wait. So A...
You can have a vinyl group.
So A is the Higgs field?
Yes. Well, I'm always taking A to be diagonal Higgs field
It's not diagonalizable.
in general.
So 2 of the 5 scalars become adjoint valued 1 form. Okay.
It's not...
Now
No,
A is in the Cartan.
I'm taking
What do you
A
mean,
to
well?
be in Cartan. I'm taking A
But
to
you
be
can't do
Cartan.
that fluidly on C.
That's the point. And I'm not talking about D4 brane on the Riemann surface. I'm talking about M5 brane on the Riemann
Yeah,
surface.
so what?
So there's no adjoint field yet. It's not the gauge theory. I'm talking about the Coulomb branch of that theory. So the only thing you have is the position of the M5 branch, say. So they have some definite position. That's what I'm calling as A. I'm just describing the Seiberg-Gaiotto curve.
Well, that's exactly what I'm confused about. You call it C, but I think you're working on sigma.
Sigma is given by A. I mean, sigma is...
A is a 1 form on the Seiberg-Gaiotto curve, sigma, or is it a 1 form on C? I think it's on sigma.
I'm considering a fibration of the root lattice over C. Well, the problem is that the theory is not gauge theory in 6 dimensions, so I don't know what's the best way to describe it. So let me just say that the
Right, but
gauge invariant way to describe the
no,
theory
but come on.
is...
I mean, as you know, if I contractified on another circle, I would have gauge theory, and
Yes.
then A would be. Then the proper thing to do is to have an adjoint valued scalar
Agreed.
on capital C.
Agreed.
There you have a Hitchin system,
Agreed.
and in general, that A cannot be globally diagonalized on C.
Agreed. I'm only talking about the generic point on C.
But okay. Now, of course, locally you can diagonalize it.
Right.
I don't know if you can diagonalize the adjoint field in the Hitchin system around any old loop.
I'm just...
I'd rather think not. So, anyway, so shall I think of A as some diagonalization of the Higgs field?
Yes. I just wanted to say that the diagonalization of the Higgs field is not unique because of the Weil group.
Well, that's true, yes.
So the only sensible thing you can think about is the Weil group invariant thing constructed out of...
Definitely the spectral curve makes sense.
Right. So that's what I'm going to use.
Right.
So because things start to vary holomorphically, valid things you can consider on the Riemann surface is these objects phi 2, phi 3, to phi n.
That's correct.
Yeah, so you can just forget about this. So A was one form. So phi k is a degree k multidifferential. You can think of it another way. A has dimension 1, scaling dimension 1 in 4 dimensions. So phi k, so this degree translates to the scaling dimension in 4 dimensions. 4 space-time dimension. So phi k has dimension k in 4D. So let's just consider the case of the torus. So on the torus, you have these fields phi 2, phi 3, phi n.
Sorry, you're taking C to be the torus then?
Yeah, C to be the torus. So you have holomorphically varying phi 2 to phi n on the torus, and I'm not putting in any singularity. So they should be constant. This means that there is 1 degree of freedom with dimension 2, 1 degree of freedom with dimension 3, to 1 degree of freedom at dimension n. This matches the dimension of the operators of SUN gauge theory. There are trace phi squared, trace phi cubed, to trace phi to the nth. Similarly, if you consider D-type theory in 6 dimensions and compactify that on a torus, you get operators phi 2, phi 4 of the even degree to phi to 2n minus 2, and
Well,
yep.
Is it D2n or DN?
It's dn, sorry about that.
Okay, that's a misprint.
Yeah, that's type. SO2n,
Yeah, that's okay.
quote unquote,
Yeah.
in 60.
That's right.
So you have phi 2, phi 4, to phi 2n minus 2, and another thing, which is phi twiddle, which I denote as phi twiddle n, that corresponds to the Pfaffian of the SO2n. So this, again, you find 1 degree of freedom at dimension 2, dimension 4, to 2n minus 2, and another operator at dimension n. So this matches with the invariant, or gauge invariant operators constructible from the adjoint of SO even. So that also agrees with what you expect from the gauge theory. So what happens if you put this twist? Sorry about this D2n, this dn. So what this twist line does to the world volume fields phi 2, is that it just doesn't act on phi 2 to phi 2n minus 2, but it multiplies phi twiddle by a minus sign. There's no constant object which gets multiplied by minus sign, so that thing is gone. This means that one object of dimension n goes away. So you see a scalar gauge invariant operator in 4 dimensions of scaling dimension 2, 4, to 2n minus 2, and you know these are the dimensions of the invariants of SO2n minus 1 or USP 2n minus 2. This analysis doesn't tell you which of these gauge theories you have. So you need to perform a slightly more detailed analysis, which we just did. But at least it's consistent with what you see as the spectrum of the gauge invariant operators. So in order to get really n equals 2 theory, you need to get something more tricky. So I won't be able to describe in a very detailed manner how things go. But so these dots represent various kinds of BPS functions, which doesn't break supersymmetry any further.
Okay, so now you're putting singularities.
Yeah, now I'm putting singularities. So let's put an minus 1 theory, so it's like SUN in 6 dimensions, on this Riemann surface with functions. Argyres-Seiberg-Gaiotto came up with a very nice way to read off what is the for the gauge theory. So I'm going to give a few supporting evidence, but I won't be able to give a complete analysis.
So some dots have a circle around them?
Yeah. So I will use 2 types of functions. So you can decompose this Riemann surface into 3 copies of 3 punctured sphere with this assignment of punctures and 2 tubes. And from the experience we have of the n equals 4 super mills, we can expect that this tube will give you SUN gauge theory in 4D. Well, first of all, if you conductify 6D theory around this circle, you get 6-dimensional theory. And you have a finite segment of that. So, well, I can expect you have SUN vector field. On the other hand, this strange thing is known or believed to represent just n by n set of free hypermultiplets.
I thought it was. What's this? I thought it was a tri-fundamental.
For SU2.
What do you mean by n by n? I thought
I'm talking about general
these
SUN.
3 punctured spheres are some strongly coupled.
If you put
superconformal theory.
if you put,
Maybe you could tell me what the boundary conditions
I'm
are?
going to tell you.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so this thing and this thing, these 2 things have different boundary conditions.
Yes.
So you need to distinguish what I just wrote and what I just have in the slide and some other combination. So these 2 things represent different objects in 4 dimensions. So I'm putting this non-symmetric thing, 3 objects.
Yeah, but what is the boundary condition on the Higgs field?
Yeah, I'm
It
going
has a
to-
simple pole, and what's the residue?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you.
Oh, okay.
So for this simple dot, I require phi 2, phi 3, that phi n to have just simple pole. I'm not giving a mass. So it's a massless function. This double dot has, so phi 2 has simple pole, phi 3 has double pole, So generically phi k has k minus 1 pole, all the k minus 1 pole. So this is the boundary condition. And it is also known that each puncture carries some flavor symmetry. So let's consider this puncture again. And let's see what kind of phi is allowed on this puncture. So let's introduce the coordinate so that this is at 0, this is at 1, this is at infinity. Right? So from these 2 conditions, phi k will be of the form, because of this behavior z to k minus 1, 1 minus z to k minus 1, and the numerator can be any polynomial in z. So you transform that to the other coordinate where w is 1 over z. If you calculate, you get w squared with p is a polynomial inverse of w. So in order to match this divergence here, we need to put p to 0. So you cannot at all, so these boundary conditions forces you to put phi to 0. This means that there is no gauge invariant Coulomb branch operators. This agrees with the statement that this represents just n by n hypermultiplets. If you just have hypermultiplets, there are operators in the Higgs branch side, but you don't have any Coulomb branch operators. So this agrees with that intuition.
Oh.
It's just a small bit of consistency check, but you can do a lot of other consistency checks. Yeah.
So wait, this n by n hypermultiplet, it's not charged under, what's it charged?
It's charged under SUN times U1. So this represents SUN flavor symmetry. This is another SUN flavor symmetry, and this is U1.
I see, but then if we glue in tubes, then they're
Right.
gauged.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now take 2 copies of n by n hypermultiplets and introduce 1 tube. So you can do the same exercise to see which kind of phi k is allowed. And I won't go into detail, but you find that all of these p's should be just constant. So you can have dimension 2 operator, dimension 3 operator, dimension n operator. So this matches with the list of dimensions for SUN gauge group. And because this is n by n, from this point of view of SUN gauge group, you have n fundamental hypermultiplets. This also gives you another n fundamental hypermultiplets. In total, you have 2n fundamental hypermultiplets. So this is a superconformal theory for which you have one parameter. Correspondingly, if you put 4 points on a sphere, there is one parameter of degrees of freedom. So you identify that. Basically, this length, as I told you, gives the 4 decoupling. So very roughly, you set log of Q to be tau, very roughly, in the weakly coupled regime. So if you have 4 points on a sphere, so let's put 3 of them at 0 and 1 and infinity, then the last point can be either close to 0, close to infinity, or close to 1. So there are 3 ways to split it. That corresponds to 3 cusps in this fundamental region in the language of tau. So the 3 special region is tau goes to infinity, tau goes to 0, and tau goes to 1. So this makes it clear why. So these 3 possibilities correspond to these 3 possibilities. So this makes clear why 2 of the 3 of them is different.
Well, sorry, the left-hand vertex there that's the 0. Where is 0 here? You actually got me confused. I see those 2 cusps are equivalent or not?
This and that is equivalent.
Yeah, of course.
This is not equivalent.
To what about the left-hand one?
Left-hand one?
Yeah.
These 2 are equivalent. I mean, this is the fundamental region. So
Yeah,
this
so
point is really
where are the 3 cusps?
this, and that.
No, but 0 is equivalent.
Yes. This corresponds to the fact that this and that is equivalent, but this looks different. I mean, on this side you have.
Wait, you really got me confused. So you're saying in this
So in general,
there should be 3 cusps in the moduli space?
if you have, when all of the 4 types of functions are different.
Oh, it's because you have these different functions.
Yes.
Ah, okay.
If
okay. So wait a second. So you have 2 inequivalent cusps.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So this makes it clear that if 2 of the 4 functions are the same type, you have 2 equivalent way of splitting it and 1 completely different way. So this corresponds to the fact that this and that in the gauge theory side is the same, and tau goes to 1 is different. And I can go back 1 slide to show that for SU2, these 2 punctures are not different because we only have phi 2, right? This means that you should not distinguish these type of 2 punctures. So in fact, for SU2, all these 3 are equivalent way of splitting it. This supports the fact that, I mean, this nicely geometrically explains why for SU2, at each cusps you always have self-duality, but when n of SUN is more than 2, you get this situation. So what happens in this limit? So this is the most strange limit. And you can decompose it this way. Now I have less and less time and less logical way to explain it. So because the divergence allowed here and there are very mild, this basically sets phi 3 around this neck when this is very long to vanish. So around here, you only have phi 2. So you only get SU2 vector field here. Well, you can do the same analysis, just you did. You start by putting the behavior of the phi 2.
So let's see. So you're looking at this corner of this weak coupling region of the theory.
Yeah.
You're trying to tell us what the theory is.
Right.
And I guess you're heading towards SU2 coupled to
Right.
this Niemisz-Jansky
Right.
theory.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm not going to give you a very logical explanation. I'm just giving you a flavor of what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a few exercises of getting what kind of phi you can have. And the reason why you can have a lot of phi, non-zero phi, is that you have at least some degree of poles on the sphere. So if you have very mild punctures like this, if you calculate what kind of divergence is allowed here, you cannot put non-zero phi 3 around here. So this means that you only have dimension 2 operator coming from here, and you have just SU2 vector. I should also say that you have one doublet coming out, but I'm not going to explain it. On the other hand, let's study what happens on this side. So let's consider this symmetric situation. Recall that this phi k behaves like dz to the k divided by z to k minus 1. So phi 2 behaves like 1 over, so let's put this to z equals 0, 1, and infinity. Then this is z times 1 over z times a polynomial. If you translate that to the w coordinate, you get this. But this is not compatible. This means that this should be 0. On the other hand, phi 3 is okay. So you have double pole here, double pole there. If you convert that on the other side, you get still double pole. So you can have constant P3. This means that in this setup, you need to set phi 2 to 0, but phi 3 to be non-zero.
It's so much easier to think in terms of the Higgs field. Can you tell us what the Higgs field is doing?
Yes. But here, the poles...
So trace phi squared is doing that, and trace
Yeah.
phi cubed is
Yeah.
doing that. So phi is doing something simple.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to avoid talking about D4 brains rather than... Yeah.
I mean, I'm confused with what you're saying, Greg. Isn't the whole point that this is a theory where you don't have the operators you think you have?
Yeah.
No.
It's not the case.
It's so much easier.
I know.
It's so much easier. If you just compactify some circle that has nothing to do with this, then it's clear that you can think of this in terms of a Higgs field. And that's where Andy and Davina and I wrote down the boundary conditions in terms of the Higgs field. If you then plug it into this determinant, the formula for the spectral curves, then you read off these boundary conditions. So I think you have a Hitchin system here.
Yes.
Are you telling you don't?
Yes.
You have a Hitchin system.
Yes, I know.
And I think, talking in terms of the boundary conditions on these phi's is much, much more complicated than saying that the Higgs field has a simple pole with a certain residue.
Right,
There's
right.
certain sort of
Yeah,
diagonal
right,
matrix, which
right,
should be very
right.
easy to write.
Well, I'm talking about nilpotent residues. but yeah.
Fine. Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
you can
yeah.
have a non-trivial
Yeah.
Jordan form as
Yeah.
the residue, but still it's a lot easier to think about.
Yeah, but once you put out the automorphism twists, it's a bit subtle. You need to exchange SP and SO odd. But anyway, yeah, I can argue. But anyway, my point is that if you consider this situation, you have only dimension 3 field. So this is not a gauge group, a gauge field, gauge theory. Whatever gauge theory has dimension 2 field, which is trace of phi squared, because you always have killing metric on the Lie algebra. So this is not the gauge theory. But around 15 years ago, 13 years ago, Minahan and Niemisz-Jansky constructed from string theory an n equals 2 theory in 4 dimensions, which exactly fits this description, you have just one operator of dimension 3 with E6 flavor symmetry, which nicely has 3 SU3 subgroups embedded symmetrically in it. So that's the thing. So, yeah, and the 1 hour has passed. Can I go on? You can, of course, leave whenever you feel. Yeah, sorry.
How much more do you have?
Now I'm going to introduce the twist lines. I'm just going to give rules and, yeah, I'm not going to explain anything anymore. I'm just going to show you a lot of cute pictures and that's it. So basically, what you do is the same. If you have a tube of dn theory, you have SO2n vector. If you have a tube with this line, you get USP, as I explained.
You're putting lines now on the Riemann surface capital C.
Right.
So, okay, just one thing about these twist lines. Are they closed, or looks like they begin and end on these punctures?
They can be whatever. I mean, it can
be closed?
It can be closed, or it can end on a puncture.
But it can't just end anywhere. It must end on a puncture.
Yeah, yeah. It can either end on a puncture, or it needs to close. So you have two types of tubes, one with and one without the twist line. And interesting thing is that you don't have SO2n minus 1 here. You get USP2n minus 2 instead, because you need to take SPO once. And the basic ingredient to have a matter content is this. We have 3 types of punctures. One has SO2n flavor symmetry. One has USP2n2 flavor symmetry, so that you can glue either that on that. The last one is a very small puncture without any flavor symmetry. It just creates a cut. And please believe me, this is just 2n minus n minus 1 hypermultiple. So from the point of view of SO2n, this is n minus 1 hypermultiple, n minus 1 fundamentals. On the other side, this is n fundamentals. So you can combine them this way or that way. So this is SO2n with 2n minus 2 fundamental hypers. This is USP with 2n fundamental hypers. So because of this slight strange product of 2n minus n minus 1, you get different number of hypers for different gauge group. But if you calculate beta function, magically they are 0 for both. And that nicely matches with the fact that if you have 4 points on a sphere, you have one parameter which can be identified with the gauge coupling of the theory. So what happens if you put q close to 0 or 1 or infinity? So if you start from this and try to move points around, you need to drag these twist lines with it. So if you do that naively, you get this. But because these are Z2 lines, you can just reconnect it without changing anything, because they are just branch cuts. Branch cuts can be moved. So everything is like...
Let's see, they're always Z2 because the Langland's duality is involutive?
No. This Z2 is associated to the...
Z2 is because you're looking at automorphism,
right,
so that they can diagram
right. I'm not doing,
involutive.
yeah, I'm not doing S-duality twist. I'm just doing outer automorphism twist.
Right, and they're all involutive except for for D4.
Yeah. So this means that this and that limit is the same, but the last one is something different, just as in the case of SUN with 2n flavors. So you can study what is going on here. And for D4, because you have this Z3, you can have more fun. So D4 has 4 operators, dimension 2 operators, dimension 4 operators, dimension 6 operators, and the Faustian, which is also dimension 4. If you carefully study how this Z3 acts on them, they fix phi 2 and phi 6, but rotates phi 4 and phi 4 twiddle by a 120-degree rotation. So the invariant part under this rotation is just phi 2 and phi 6, which fits the gauge invariant polynomials constructed out of G2 adjoint field. So let's consider this. So without this green line, this was SO8 with 6 flavors. But now I have this green line. This is composed of this.
Oh, this green line is the Z3?
This is the Z3 of
The Z3 twist?
yeah, sorry, yeah, this green Z3 operation.
Mm-hmm.
What does it do? If you split this, you still have 3 hypers, SO8 gauge field, and 3 hypers in the fundamental, 8-dimensional representation. But the question is, which 8-dimensional representation?
Wait, stop. You have an SO8 or a G2 vector?
It is SO8, because this doesn't, the reason why putting this on a torus reduced the gauge theory is that this side and the other side is identified.
Mm.
That's why phi 4 and phi 4 twiddle is projected out. This does not project it out.
So you have an SO8 there.
Yeah, so you still have SO8. If you have line on this side, this projects out the phi 4 and phi 4 twiddle, and you get G2. So what this does is to change the verb on this side to the other side by a triality transformation. So the representation, 8-dimensional representation here and there should be different. How different is immaterial here, because they are all equivalent. So let's say you have vector representation and you have spinor representation. This is still beta function is 0 because, well, they're equivalent, so they contribute to the productive beta function equally. So it's an SO8 with a funny matter content. But now we have a representation in terms of 6-dimensional theory, so you can easily write down the Seiberg-Gaiotto curve. So what happens if you take the limit? So let's exchange y and q. Without this thing, you get this, and we reconnected it like this. Without this, you need to cross this, right? So it's kind of tricky. So first, I move this green thing around here, and then you slide this in, slide that out to get to this position. And now you can see what happens if you go around it. Because of the non-commutativity of this Z3 and Z2, if you go these 4 lines, you get one Z3 operation. And you need to compute a bit, but you finally get this configuration. So it's just an easy game you can do.
So you're just calculating the autonomous.
Yes. Yeah. So originally we had this, which is SO8 with 6 flavors, but 3 in the vector and 3 in the spinor. You have dimension 2 operator, dimension 4, 4 twiddle, and 6. On the other side, the system is composed of these 3 objects. In the middle, you have U2 and U6 only. So this and that should have dimension 4 operator. So they are not just free hypermultiplet anymore. So what's that? This one has dimension 4 operator, not the gauge theory. As I said, a gauge theory should have dimension 2 operator. This at least has USP6 flavor symmetry and G2 flavor symmetry. And in fact, Minahan-Nemechensky's E7 theory does the job. E7 has this nice maximal subgroup. So if you open Solansky and see the list of subgroups of groups, there are regular subgroups and the irregular special subgroups.
This is not a sub-Dink diagram.
Yeah, this doesn't come from sub-Dinky diagram. But it's a maximal subgroup, which is very good. And this is theory is known to have only one operator of dimension 4. And you can check many other things, like comparing Higgs branches, etc., etc. So my conclusion is that this theory is dual to that. And this was predicted by Argyres and Wittig just after the paper of Argyres and Seiberg. So they did a trial and error calculation of matching central charges and flavor symmetry, blah, blah. But now I have a construction from 6 dimensions, and you can understand why, if you take this limit, you get a different decomposition. Okay. So that's it. So today I discussed n equals 2 theory with vanishing beta function and tried to see what happens when tau becomes very strong. 6P theory helped us understand the behavior at strong coupling, and to get non-simply laced gauge group in 4D, you need to put these interesting twist lines on the reversal. Thank you very much.